What we're about to go over are compound inequalities. As opposed to just one inequality, compound inequalities deal with two inequalities, specifically trying to graph two inequalities on the same graph. So, these type of inequalities, compound inequalities, usually use one of the following words. You're going to usually see one of these two words when you have a compound inequality. You're going to have and, or you're going to have the word or. So you're going to have this, or you're going to have this and this. So usually these two words are going to be in between the two inequalities that you're trying to graph on the same graph. So a compound inequality is simply taking two inequalities and putting them together, usually trying to graph them on the same graph. And they're going to use one of the following words, and, or. Now since the word and, that means it has to satisfy both inequalities. And in the graph, that's shown by usually shading in the middle. If the inequalities have the word or, that means it can satisfy one or the other. Those are usually shaded to the outside. So a compound inequality is simply taking two inequalities and putting them together. And a lot of times they use one of the following words, and or. So let's look at an example. Example number 1. They want us to graph this compound inequality. I want to know a number that will satisfy this inequality and this inequality. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a graph, and that's going to help me figure out what the answers are for this. Numbers that will work for this inequality and numbers that will work for this inequality. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the smaller of the two numbers, graph it first. Smaller of these is -1. I'll look at the symbol. That tells me to put an open circle. -1 is not an answer. I take the larger number, graph it over here where larger numbers go. I look at that symbol. 5 is not an answer. But guess what? I'm going to shade in the middle because it has the word and. All these numbers right here in the middle are my answers. For example, 4. 4 is an example of an answer. 4 is greater than -1 and 4 is less than 5. Numbers on the outside out here don't work for both of them. Like 6. 6 would be over here and it's not graphed. 6 is greater than -1. Yes. Is 6 less than 5? No. 6 does not work for both of these. 6 is not greater than -1 and less than 5. All these numbers in between -1 and 5 are answers. And problems are usually shaded in the middle. And the shading is where all your answers are. Let's look at another example. This is an OR problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to graph it, and it's going to help me figure out where my answers are. Draw a number line. Start with my smaller number, which is -2. Open or close circle. Open circle. That means -2 is not an answer. Come over here to 5. Since it's bigger than -2, it needs to go over here on this side. Look at my symbol. Open circle on 5 as well. Neither -2 or 5 is an answer. Or problems are usually shaded to the outside. That's where all my answers are. All my answers are greater than -5. All my answers are less than -2. Unlike the word and, where it has to satisfy both, an or means an answer only has to satisfy one of them. One of these numbers that I'm going to pick only has to work for one of them. For instance, let's try 6 again. 6 is bigger than 5, So I'm going to put it right here and see if it works. 6 is less than negative 2. No, it doesn't work. But does it work for this one? 6 is greater than 5. Yes. It only has to work for one of them to work when the word is or. It didn't work for this one. Is 6 less than negative 2? Or is 6 greater than 5? Yes, 6 is greater than 5. So an AND problem, the number you pick has to work for both. An OR problem, it only has to work for one of them. Sometimes they're going to write an AND inequality and not use the word AND. They're going to write it all pushed together to where it's written like this right here. When it's written all together like this, this is an AND problem. Notice it has, instead of just two sides, this inequality has 3 sides. And it's almost saying all the answers are in between 6 and 12. So when it looks like this, all pushed together, this is an AND problem. Always graph the smaller number over here, the larger number over here. This symbol right here goes with the 6. That means I put an open circle on 6. This symbol right here goes with the 12. That means I put a closed circle on it. 6 is not an answer, but 12 is. And when they put it all together like this, that is an AND problem. That means I'm going to shade all in the middle here. That means all the answers in between 6 and 12, and including 12, is an answer. So these problems like this that are all put together to where it's not separated, these are AND problems. They will also ask you to actually take a picture of an inequality, a graph, and write an inequality from it. Here's the picture of the inequality. They're going to ask you to rewrite this picture using symbols, using the inequality symbols and numbers. So let's do that with this. First, you look at the graph and you determine whether or not you're going to have an AND problem or an OR problem. Since this one's shaded to the outside, I'm going to use the word OR. I write an inequality for this part of the graph right here. This is telling me that all my answers are less than negative 1. That's this part of the graph. This is the symbols for this part of the picture right here. Then I'll look at this part down here. All my answers, which is represented by X, are greater than or equal to, because it's shaded, 10. There's what the inequality looks like when you actually write the compound inequality. So they're going to start giving you pictures or graphs, and you're going to have to translate that graph into symbols. If it's an open circle, remember you use this symbol. If it's a closed circle, you use this symbol right here. If it's shaded to the outside, you're going to use OR. Let's look at one more example. They're going to ask you, write a compound inequality from this graph right here. First off, I'm going to start with this one. All my answers are what? Less than or greater than negative 12? Looks like greater than. And since it's shaded, or equal to negative 12, it's shaded in the middle. That means I'm going to use the word AND. Now I need to write this part of the inequality in symbols. All my answers are also less than 8. If it's shaded in the middle, I use the word AND. I use this part right here, and look where it's shaded. It looks like it's all greater than or equal to negative 12. And this part right here is less than 8. Here's me writing in symbols this graph right here. So they're going to give you a problem, and you're going to actually have to graph it, and then you're going to have to do the reverse. They're going to give you the graph, and then you're going to have to write the inequality.